For those of you who haven't attended broker compliance training, welcome. Wanted to go over the compliance training guidelines beforehand. So we are doing, my goal is to just do an overview of the training, the correct way to fill out forms. Okay. Feel free to ask any questions that you have during the training, anything that comes up, take yourself off mute or raise your hand. Either one is fine with me. I don't mind interaction. I prefer it. So any questions you have, feel free to either raise your hand or come off mute. If you can have your camera on, that would be fantastic. I understand that some people are dual career and at their other jobs, so if you can't, that's okay. But just know that for if you are a launch agent, these classes do count towards graduation. So there are new steps in place in order to make sure that you are well versed and you're knowledgeable about the contracts. And so that's really the ultimate goal with launch training and this broker compliance is to make sure that you are just ready to go and confident to take on listings and take on new clients and that you're well informed and you'll always have me to fall back on if you have questions, but we want to send you out ready and prepared. So here's the training guidelines. If you'd like, jot down my email address here if you don't already have it. At the end of this class, if you'd like a copy of the template that we create to reference back to, I'll email it to you. So if you shoot me over an email and say, I want a copy of the residential listing agreement that we went over in class, I'll respond back and I'll send a copy of the listing agreement that we have. So try to do it today. I do reuse this training, and so I don't always keep this necessarily this template on hand because I do use, the forms over and over again for training, and sometimes they'll overlap or I make changes. So if you want a copy of it, let me know. My email address is here at the bottom, lisa.hodge@kw.com. Okay, perfect. Any questions on that before we move on to training? Okay, let's get to it. All right, today we're going over the residential listing agreement and CMA. So I like to start a little backwards. So we will do the CMA first, and then we will do the input of the residential listing agreement. Now I popped up just the first property off the hot sheet is what we're going to use to do a CMA. It's a little easier to do it for properties that are already on MLS. So I'm going to show you a couple ways just as far as compliance purposes, what we need in the file. However, you can use whatever strategy that you want in order to come up with a value. So I use kind of a combination. I will pull the property to see if it was listed on MLS. For example, I have a listing now that has never been listed, and so I didn't use a strategy. But this is an easier way to do it. If you pull up a property that's already on the market, there's an easy button that says Find Comps, and you can find comparable sales. You can use Cloud CMA, which is what I'll show you, RPR, and then I do like to use when I am actually doing a pricing strategy, I will go on to the third-party sites because that's what all the buyers are doing. Buyers are not pulling CMAs. Buyers are not going on MLS, pulling sold data and pending data. So I look at it through the perspective of a potential buyer. So what is my competition? What are buyers looking like that are similar to my property? Where am I going to fall in pricing? And so I will look at it. I'll pull up the factual data, which is what I'll show you. And then I also like to pull up the data from a prospective buyer and what they're looking at when they're scrolling on homes.com and Zillow and realtor.com and all those third-party sites at night. So it's really up to you, however, whatever strategy you want to deploy. But we do need, for compliance purposes, something in a format that we can provide and upload and have the seller sign that says, okay, here are the metrics that we used in order to come up with this value. So it is required for the file and for compliance. And so we've had a few people that have used ChatGPT. Great resource. It's good. They can pull data, but we just need something that's a little bit more because we know we're still working out the kinks with AI. And so we do have to have oversight because sometimes the properties might not be, information might not be completely accurate. So if you do want to use ChatGPT, I don't have a problem with it. You can get property information. Just be sure to input that information into either here. So if you find a property that ChatGPT has listed, be sure to input it here and make sure that the data is correct. So just verify it because it's a not quite 100% reliable. And then we do have a job as a licensee to confirm all information. So this is a credible source. You can use anything from MLS. You don't have to double check it. If you do use ChatGPT, great, but you have to input all of the properties in here or in RPR or another verifiable source, right? Okay, so moving along, we have, close this here. Okay, so we have a property here. I just pulled up the hot sheet property that got listed, so we'll use this one, Finsbury Avenue, Sacramento. So what we can do here is, let me make this a little bit bigger here. So we'll take a look at the property, and this is a pretty good property to comp because it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,470 square feet. Very common property, built in 1967, 1-story, single-family property. So kind of nothing, too unique about the property. Actually, guys, I'm gonna go back a little bit. So I forgot I created this for you guys. Okay. CMA checklist before we get started on MLS. Okay, here is, and I can send you a copy of this as well if you'd like it. So the CMA checklist. So step one, what we want to do is verify the subject property. So a client gives you a call and says, hey, I have this property, I was referred to you by, coworker, and I have this property that I want to sell. So you do all of the information, your initial seller intake, consultation, and then you start verifying the subject property. So the property address, bed bath square footage, which we started to do on the other property, lot size, year built, property style, which is what we already started doing. So, you look for anything different. If it's a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,500 square feet, very common. It's going to be a lot easier to comp. And depending on the area as well. What type of property is it? Single family, condo, townhome? Is it, a duplex, triplex, etc.? And then unique features. And so when you're taking that consult, you say, okay, is there a pool? Is there ADU, solar? Is there anything special about the property? RV parking? Is it across the street from a park? Are there views? And so asking questions like that, because we're going to take all that into consideration when pulling comps. The condition, original, dated, updated, or is it renovated? So that'll give you a good indication too when you're pulling comps at what you're looking at as far as other properties that you're going to compare it to. And then review MLS history. So see if it's ever been listed on the market. It's always a lot easier when there is some MLS history there. Confirm the HOA fees, mellow roofs, if there's any special assessments, you can check that too. And then step 2 is define the market area. So the neighborhood, subdivision, and the boundaries. A lot of times, properties will be on the map. You'll take a look at maybe a 1-mile radius, and you'll see vastly different property values from one side to another. And that could be because there is maybe a stream or a pond or maybe a freeway that essentially splits the area. So proximity wise, they could be within a quarter of a mile from one another, but the markets are distinctly different. And so when you're pulling comps, look at the neighborhoods. I have a property right now. It's older home, but it's by new construction. So all of the comps are pricing it higher because it's by all of this new construction. And so the average market and the average price, because of all the new construction, seems like it's a lot higher, but it's really not. And so that's where we use our expertise and say, okay, this house was built in, the 1950s. And it's divided, it's very close to all this new construction that's going on, but somebody's not going to pay, 600,000, which is the new construction, versus a house that was older. Yes, it's similar in square footage, etc., but the features are vastly different. It's not new construction, and so it looks like that it's higher on paper, but it's really not. So this is why it's important to identify the neighborhood boundaries and areas. School district also makes a difference. The rating a school district, it could be one street over, and kids are going to a higher rated school, 9s, 10s potentially, and the versus lower, the value is going to be different. Even if you're not, don't have kids going to that school necessarily, its desirability is going to be different with the higher rated school district versus a not high rated school district. Proximity to freeways, if it faces the freeway, it makes a difference in value to an appraiser if it directly faces a freeway. So check on that. There's any amenities, the walking, shopping, dining, etc. So this is an important part. This is the metrics we're going to use when we're pulling comparable data. So 6 to 10 comps, a mix of 3 to 5 properties closed in the last 90 days, if you can find them. Appraisers use their parameters are 90 days, like property within a 1 mile radius. So it has to be similar age, bed baths. That's what an appraiser is going to look for. There are some cash sales, but they're not subject to an appraisal. Most are finance properties, and so they're going to have an appraisal that is required. So this is the data that they're looking for. So close within the last 90 days, within a 1 mile radius. You can go further out if it's a property that's a unique property, if it's a country property, if there are any kind of special type of property. Okay. And then looking for bed bath, similar bed bath, similar age, pending and active properties. Can you guys give me just a second? I'm so sorry about that. Okay. So the pending active comps to be used 1 to 2 pending or active. Appraisers will use actives at time just to if they don't have enough comparables. Sometimes they will throw an active in, especially if it's a subdivision where the properties are exactly alike. They'll use active. And they'll exclude out of area, except if it's rural. Like I said, they'll sometimes go outside of that 1 mile radius. And then step 5 is we analyze the market conditions. Right now it's a kind of a weird market. So they'll look at, is it appreciating market? Is it declining market? Or is it a flat market? Right now, it's kind of a flat market. So we're not seeing a lot of a high level appreciation. Some are declining a little bit, but overall it's kind of a flat market right now. Take a look at the days on market. So this is really important too when you're having these discussions with your clients about expectations, right? Level setting the expectations of here's all of these properties, here's all our comparables. Average days on market is 45 days on market. Average days on market in this area is 60 days on market. So it is letting the client know what the average days on market are. And then list to sales price ratios. If you are, right now we're not seeing those 103 list to sales price ratios that we have before. Right now it's closer to, 98, 99% list to sales price because we do see those price drops, price reductions. Sellers are still thinking that it's a seller's market. Buyers are not wanting to pay those prices, and buyers are offering less than list price. I'm seeing, okay, well, let's go in 10,000 lower and ask for a credit. And so we're seeing a lot of that right now with this market. So looking at the overall marketing conditions is what we'll do. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so we are going over to here. Can you guys still see my screen?
Yeah,
Okay.
we can see it still.
Perfect. All right. Okay. Okay, so we are going to use we're going to use the information here. And are you all familiar? Have you ever used the Cloud CMA, or do you use Cloud CMA?
Yeah, it all the time.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
This
All
is
right.
the only program I've ever used for comps. I might compare it to other terms, but this is the main one I use.
Okay, good. Yeah, I like Cloud CMA. It's super easy to use, user friendly, and it'll pull them quick for you. Okay, so those of you that haven't used it, you add in subject property here. It automatically will pull the bedrooms, bathroom square footage. And I like to do here, quick and dirty, get at least 10 listings. I don't go back a year. I like to go back just 3 months. And you click here.
In slower markets, that doesn't have as much turnover, do you go to 6 or 9 months after the next step?
Yep, I will. So it depends on what it shows. So a quick, easy one will pull the information like this. So
Yeah.
I start like this, and then I'll either go out and spread the parameter wider, just depending on what the data shows. So, like I said, sometimes, I have that listing and it's right by all the new construction. And so pulling 10 listings wasn't accurate here because it showed all of this new build and it's not a new build. And so, yes, you can modify as needed, but this will give you a good template.
Okay.
And you can send this over. So this is it. This is for compliance purposes. This is okay to use for our file too. So you can go in here and so that we have some closed here. And they look really similar, 3-bed, 2-bath, and it's all pretty similar square footage here. And I'm looking just here at the year built as well. So they're going to be some pretty decent comps. This one's a little bit bigger and a little higher price point there. And then those excluded, they're a little bit smaller. But yeah, so this is how you could do a CMA. You can get the information, pull all the information, go through, mark the ones that you want to exclude. You might know the area, and so maybe there's some properties that you say, oh yeah, I know that property. That definitely I'm not going to use that in my CMA. So go through. It does take some time to go through and kind of click back and forth, and then you can so then you customize report, and there you go. So that's how you do your CMA. So it'll give you a high, average, medium. Let me see here. And then what I do with this report, you can share it with your client. What I do, there's a lot of pages that come when we complete the report. So what I do is I'll do the PDF, and there's 2 pages. There's a map of the property, and it shows all of the properties that we used. What I'll do is I'll use the PDF for those 2 forms, and that's what I use as my CMA. And that's what I use for the file. So you can so it's 56 pages, the full CMA. So what I like to do is this page here. It's the map, shows the comparable listings here. And then it shows the summary of the comparable listings. And so I will take those 2 pages, and I convert them, and that is my CMA for the file.
Do you also use this when presenting to a client?
Yep, I do.
Then you just use the map and the summary.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Use the map and the summary. They like to see the map. It seems like it kind of, works out a little bit better for the clients when they're viewing the map. And then the properties here, and it'll have their subject property, and then they're able to compare it here. Right. Okay. All right. Any questions on that before we move on? Okay. All right. Let's get back over to our listing agreement. Okay. So we have that property. We were using Finsbury Avenue in Sacramento. Date prepared. If you click it here, it automatically populates. So be sure to put the date prepared there, seller's name, if it's being sold in a trust or entity seller like an LLC, just be sure that the information is correct and it's accurate and it's entered in correctly. Okay. Another thing I like to do beforehand when I'm pulling up the property information, when I'm taking a listing, I will pull up the property history and then I make sure who's on title. It'll give me a good indication of, okay, how much did they owe? When was the last time they took out a loan, right? If they just pulled out they just refinanced last year, it's like, okay, that's going to be, okay, concerning. So what's going on there? How much did they owe approximately? And those are all questions that you ask also, in the listing present or in the listing consultation. But they're really easy to spot out when you do pull up the property information. Okay, so all of the information here should be added in, brokerage name, city, county, zip code, and then the APN number. Listing period. So right now, anywhere standard listing time frame, anywhere from 4 to 6 months, I'd say on average, really depending on the agreement that you have with the seller, it could vary. I've done a 30-day listing agreement with an expired listing before because they said, okay, I'll give you 30 days. If you can get it sold in 30 days, that's fine. So it's 30-day listing. So it really is going to depend on your consultation and your seller's needs. But it could be, what the market dictates is anywhere between 4 to 6 months. That's enough time to market the property, get it into contract, close with the buyer. If maybe the buyer falls out of escrow at 30 days to put another potential buyer into contract. And so that'll give you ample time to be able to sell it. 60 days is short. It's a very short escrow period in order to be able to do all the marketing and bring it to close. And so, anywhere between 4 to 6 months is going to be a better, more accurate amount. So we'll just put it in there. Okay. Listing price. And again, that's just a discussion that you have with the client. So we'll say 500,000. If it's a specific type or a special type of property, manufactured, if it's probate, conservatorship, or guardianship, if it is any of those, these forms automatically will attach. Okay. Compensation to seller's broker. So you put your compensation amount in, or if there was a different amount, or if it was a flat fee. Again, a discussion that you have. The seller standard is we put our commission amount here. Okay. Additional compensation to seller's broker if buyer's unrepresented. So this is not how much you're going to pay a buyer's agent. We don't just put anywhere in the listing agreement the amount a seller is willing to pay a buyer's agent for compensation. So that's omitted from the listing agreement. We can have discussion with the sellers about it. However, it is not placed anywhere inside the listing agreement. That amount is placed on the residential purchase agreement offered by the buyer's agent, how much they would like to be compensated. And then the seller can then agree to either pay it or not pay it or counter at that point. But we omitted that when we had the NAR lawsuit and omitted that. It amended the listing agreement, so that is excluded. Now, what we can do is if there's an additional compensation to if the buyer's unrepresented. So perfect example is if a buyer who's an investor, you're hosting an open house at your listing, an investor walks in and says, hey, I want to buy this property. I'm going to submit an offer. I don't need an agent. I've bought 3 other properties, so I'm an expert and I'm going to do it myself. Great, not a problem. Now, the problem that we run into is that they don't always know the timeframes, all the paperwork that needs to be done. And so we're doing a lot of that extra legwork because we're working with somebody who is not an agent. And so it will take additional work because we have additional work to do because they're not an agent. And so you can charge an additional amount to the seller if there's a buyer that's unrepresented. Okay, you can do 1%, you can do a flat fee amount. I've seen, 0.5% additional here. So you could just put the amount here. This can also be amended if you do have a seller that's unrepresented and maybe they are an agent. Maybe they're not going to take, all that work and your seller says, hey, you know, this is not going to be that much work. Can we amend this? You can always amend the listing agreement or your compensation, but it's always good to at least put a certain amount in here, because if not, you will be doing, and you and your TC will highly likely be doing a lot of additional work you wouldn't have to do if the buyer was represented. So that is what that includes. See, you had that in from another training. Okay. If there were continuation rights, compensation for broker identified prospective buyers, you can put a continuation period here for buyers that you've identified. If you have had a buyer list and you said, hey, yes, I got this new listing, this fits perfectly for what you're looking for, and you showed the buyer and they didn't purchase it then, but maybe the listing expires or they cancel the listing, you can have a 30-day, up to 30-day continuation period. That way, you could still be compensated if that buyer that you brought and you were the procuring cause purchases that listing. Okay. Seller obligation to pay previous brokers. We come across this, I feel, quite a bit where they maybe are uncertain, right? Buyers and sellers are both uncertain regarding the cancellation and the validity of their cancellation with the previous agent. Like, well, I think so. I don't know if I have a contract. I'm not sure when. And so they would have to list that there. So most of the time, especially right now, a lot of everything's done over electronic, right? And so oftentimes we'll get copies. So just make sure that that if it may be an expired listing, that you make sure that the contract was fully canceled. That way there's not an issue with listing a property that should be on the market with another agent, or you have to wait until the listing cancellation period expires. Okay. Or if they want to, maybe they'd agreed with the other listing agent, they'll pay them a compensation. However, they don't want to work with them anymore. So, but either way, seller would need to fill that out. If you're paying a referral fee, so if this was a referral, if you got a listing referral from another KW agent, maybe out of the area, and you're paying out a referral fee, mark this box and the RAD form will be attached. Okay. Any items included in the sale, big one is solar. Okay, a lot of people have solar. If there's any items excluded from the sale, then they would list that here. Again, I'll use this template. I'll give you all the template, but it's just an example. So don't use this listing and if they don't have solar. So double check and make sure if any of these items are taken out. Okay. Any leased or lien items, if there's propane tank, if the solar is leased, then you would mark that there. Any liened items, if there's a lien or anything, if they financed anything where there's a lien on the property. Smart home features, if there were any smart home features, they would be listed there. Property will be marketed in the following MLS. Metro List, if there's an additional MLS, you could put that here as well. Okay, so we do not allow, our MLS does not allow us to put that seller is willing to pay concessions to another broker. Okay. If you've had a discussion with the seller and the seller says, yes, I'm willing to pay, and we can market that within Keller Williams. Okay. So we can do that marketing on our websites and we can market that. We cannot put that on MLS. And so if they want to allow it and they've told you, yes, we're going to pay concessions, and you mark that box, then you can market it outside of MLS. Okay. Any questions before moving on?
Can you just repeat that? So you can, if that's checked, you can now legally market outside of MLS if that's checked.
Yes, it's always been that way. Yes. And so you've always been able to, as long as the seller authorizes it, if they've disclosed that, yes, they're willing to pay a compensation to a buyer's broker and you can advertise it. Yes, you can put it on on your website. You can put it anywhere seller's willing to pay. You can put it on your Facebook. Yes. So it's just, it's restricted from MLS. But you can, if you mark it here, you can market that the seller is willing to pay a compensation. Yes. Okay. Timing and presentation of offers. Typically, we have it here, seller instructs broker to present all offers as received or as soon as practicable. That's the standard way to do it. Or you can have offers presented on, and you could put a certain date here. Maybe there's maybe more than one seller or a group of sellers, and they're going to meet on, a predetermined date in the future. So that's why that date would apply. Other than that, it's just typical that their offers come in as they're received. But you could use that in the case where there's, multiple or contentious, or, I've used it in a court ordered divorce sale where we do it. We present all offers, 2 weeks out or whatever the date is. Okay, these buyer supplemental offer letters, also known as love letters, seller instructs broker not to present buyer letters, or if you mark it here, seller instructs broker to present letters. If seller requests or relies on buyer's letters, seller's acting against broker's advice. So these are the letters that say, seller, we're a great family. Please sell us your house because we'll take great care of it. They're great, right? But there's a strong line there between, fair housing violations, right? Because if we present it to the seller and the buyer's offer doesn't get accepted because it's 30,000 below list price, right? And we accept another offer, they could say, they discriminate against me because I have a family, right? Or fill in the blank, class of persons that they could discriminate against, because there's more personal information. And so it opens us and the seller opens them up to an issue. And so it's just better if you don't provide the love letters. I mean, I've seen them where they're great, but yeah, it's just there's too many issues here. They can exchange their love letters after close of escrow, right? Because we all like that heartfelt, and it's always a good feeling when a seller sells their house to a buyer who's great. They're going to take care of the property, and it's a great warm and fuzzies all around. But yeah, if it's something that they don't like, right, then we open up the issue. So that's what this is for. Okay, investigation and reports. Standard is NHD report. Okay. If you have a discussion with the seller ahead of time and they agree they're going to get, maybe this property is of concern, okay? And they're like, we need to address everything up front because we have to net a certain amount of money. So let's get a pest report, home inspection report, let's get a roof report. So you can get all of these up front. You don't have to mark anything. So this is typically left blank unless otherwise, discussed with the seller. So NHD report is seller is required. All sellers, even exempt sellers, are required by law to provide a natural hazard disclosure report. So that's why we have that marked. Okay, exceptions to ownership. If there were any exceptions, if there is something going on with ownership, if it's in a trust, if there is an LLC, if there's some type of maybe somebody deeding on or deeding off, or it's a court or a divorce, whatever the case may be, if there's any type of exception, it would go there. Okay, if the seller needs to sell this home, if they need to find a replacement property in order to make the sale happen, to sell the home, then this would be marked here. So seller intends to include a contingency to purchase a replacement property as part of transaction. And so be sure to include that and let other potential buyers know that if they don't find a replacement, they're staying here and the sale will not go through. Okay, if the seller wants to opt out of lockbox or signs, mark that there. So have that discussion with them. Sometimes people don't want their neighbors knowing that their house is for sale, or they don't want a lockbox on the property. So they can choose to either omit either one of those. Okay, any additional terms or anything additional, mark that here. Okay, any questions? Okay, you guys are good today. All right, I'm going to move over to the MLSA, which is the Multiple Listing Service Addendum. So this is the MLS addendum to the property. Okay, so this goes into detail about what the MLS is, what the duties are, and we all have a contract and an agreement with MLS. Okay, so we signed this agreement, so we do have to abide by the rules of our MLS. Okay, so this is incorporating the MLS rules along with the realtor rules as well, and what we need to abide by. Okay, so I get this question probably the most often is, when do we have to go on the market? If I get the listing agreement, get it signed right away, well, why do I have to put on MLS right away? Because I still have to get photos done, I have to get marketing, etc. And so this is where this comes into play. So let me touch on this really quick. Clear cooperation. So clear cooperation does apply. Do not mark this. So we use our MLS does clear cooperation applies. And so everything, we don't have a coming soon. Okay, there's no coming soon. We have to opt out of the coming soon. We can't put coming soon signs available on the property unless explicitly written by the seller, which is, there's a really big gray area there. So to be compliant, no coming soon signs. Property has to be on the market within 3 days of obtaining the listing agreement on MLS. So those are the rules. With that being said, I hope the rules change. I don't think they're fair. And I think we're in a moment right now where we're kind of being punished for one or two bad apples. And I think it will change, but that's just my 2 cents. Okay. I'm teaching compliance and giving my opinion. So to be compliant, no coming soon signs. And we have to use clear cooperation, meaning MLS is really trying to prohibit agents from marketing the property before it's available to everybody on the market. The theory and the standpoint of MLS is that it's better for the seller and the consumer to have everybody see their property at the same time to get the highest and best offer, because they want exposure to the most people. Now, what they're saying is that agents will do it because they want to double end the deal, and they don't want it going out to the public because they want to limit the exposure, because they want, to get this, small pool of buyers that they're going to sell it to, right? I don't necessarily agree to that. I don't think that that agents are trying to not get the best offer that they possibly can. So I don't know. Maybe I deal with only, you guys and great agents, but people aren't in general out there trying to be deceptive to the public and try to not market, because we all know we get a listing, we want to sell it, and we want to sell it quickly. So and then I think the most part that the coming soon signs are just to generate excitement and keep that momentum going. And hey, yes, we're getting the property on the market, but hey, if a neighbor sees the property and they really want it, or somebody down the street and they've been looking, great, like let's do it quickly and get the seller, their offer quickly. So this kind of limits that. So we will go over to here, the question that I get asked a lot. So you take the listing, and then there's this time period where maybe they have to fix it up, they have to get the property clean, they have to get the yard done, etc. So marketing option. The marketing option selected below shall start at the beginning of the listing period, and then you could put whatever date. Okay, so if they are going to need 2 weeks and you're going to get, or maybe the week, and they're going to get photos done and the property's going on the market next Friday, then that would be the date. So that's the start date. So you get the listing signed, they need some time to do photos, clean the property up. That is the date here. So the marketing begins that date. Okay. And then here, again, coming soon, our MLS does not allow it, so we can't mark that here. We can do, these we don't really use. Office exclusive limited exposure. We don't really see a whole lot of that either. And then here, the seller photograph instruction. Seller instructs broker to publish in the MLS that taking of images is limited to those persons preparing appraisal or inspection reports. If the seller doesn't want photos taken on the inside of their house by any other parties, then you would mark that there. And I could see, the reason for sometimes privacy where they don't want, additional photos taken of the property. Okay. Okay, that brings us to the end. So we covered the CMA listing agreement and MLSA.